Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Kesubos Daf Samech Tes. Baruch Hashem, my next scheduled flight is in January. I can assure you that won't last, but for now it is the case. Probably not true for Mark Halpert, who travels quite a bit. And right now we've been learning a sugya on the last 15 lines of Samech Tes Amud Beis. We were discussing the sugya of whether or not a parnasa is similar to a t'nai ksuba. Is a dowry halachically similar to the t'nai ksuba, to things that are conditions within a ksuba? And the Gemara concluded that there are differences between the two. And on the top of Samech Tes Amud Aleph, we actually continue this sugya in the following way. Talale Rav le Rebbe beinei chite. Rav was a Talmud of Rebbe. Rebbe wrote the Mishnayos. Rav, who's a Talmud of Rebbe, he wrote a letter to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and Beinei Chite, between the lines, he added in the following shaila. That's how Rashi explains Tosfos slightly differently based on the Rabbeinu Chananel. And the top line says the shaila that Rav wrote in the margins of the letter was Ha'achen sheshi'abdu mahu. If the brothers made a shibud of the father's properties, so then what happens with the dowry? Can she collect the dowry from items that are now in shibud? So the Gemara says, Hava Yosef Reb Chia Kameh. When Rebbe was opening his mail that day, Reb Chia was sitting there. And then they saw Rav's shaila. Amar Le, Reb Chia says back to Rav, I don't understand Rav's. Reb Chia says back to Rebbe, I don't understand Rav's question. Was it machro or mishkano? Were we talking about a case where the brothers sold the father's properties? So they're lekuchos. Are we allowed to take dowry from the lekuchos? Or no, was the shaila a little differently? Oh, mashkano. Was it that they use them as collateral, just put it down, against a loan, whatever the case may be? So Amar Le, Rebbe says back to Reb Chia, that question's ridiculous. My nafkamina, there should be no difference between whether or not the properties of the father were sold by the son or given over as a collateral. After all, bein machro or bein shemashkin, whether or not the properties were sold or put in as a collateral, motziin leparnasa, we would allow a woman to collect her dowry from those properties. However, we are not allowed to give a woman her basic mizonos from lekuchos, from properties that have been sold. But the Gemara was still bothered a little bit that Rav, when he wrote the shaila, didn't distinguish between mashkano and machro, whether or not the properties of the father were sold or whether or not they were used as collateral. So the Gemara questions that, Samech Tes Amud Aleph, 5 lines down, when Rav wrote the letter, why didn't he distinguish? If we're saying that the brothers sold the property of the father, and the question of Rav, when he wrote his letter to Rebbe, was whether or not a woman could collect her dowry from properties that were sold, then just write that. Then just write nichtov le machro. And imashkeno mi baile. If really Rav was asking about a case where the brothers gave over the properties that they got from their father as a collateral, then nichtov le mashkeno. Then Rav should have asked his shaila explicitly. Why are you leaving this to chance? Let's say this question a little better. If Reb Chia was confused by what Rav meant, then Rav should have done a better job of articulating his question. And anyone who's anywhere remotely close to giving advice to people ever will know that the way people ask the questions is not only the question itself, it's also evidence of their state of mind. Why didn't Rav detail exactly what his question was? And the Gemara responds 8 lines down on Samech Tes Amud Aleph, Rav tarvaihu kami boyale. Really, Rav's intention was to ask about both a case where the brothers sold the father's property and where the brothers potentially gave over the father's property as a mashkon. So then in code, that's what we just learned. Here's what Rav is really saying. Rav wants to know if the brothers take the father's property and they do one of two things. They either sell it to someone else or they give it up as collateral. And now the question is, can the sisters go claim from the lekuchos or claim from the person holding the mashkon that they really deserve their dowry? Is that reasonable or not? Now, what does Rav say? Rav really tarvaihu kami ba'ale. And Visavar, he argued the following thing. I can't detail out my question as machro or as mashkano, because iksivna le machru, if I would have written the shaila to Rebbe saying machru, that the brothers sold the father's property, then hanicha, I would have been able to extrapolate an answer from Rebbe, ishalach li demotzin. I would have been able to understand Rebbe in both cases had he written back that yes, we are able to allow the woman to be motzi, to take money out of the sold property, because then kol shekain mashkeno, because if it's true by the case of machru, it's all the more so true by the case of mashkeno. But ishalach li ein motziin, had the shaila been written to Rebbe only in a case of machru, and had he answered ein motziin, that we're not allowed to give her money from a sold property, so then I would have been very confused, because akati mashkeno kami baili, I would have then been unclear about the case of where the father's properties were given over as a mashkon. So therefore, I couldn't only write the case of machru. And iksivna le mashkeno, had it been that when I asked my shaila, the shaila was only about where the sons of the father gave over the property as a mashkon, and therefore we want to know from that case whether or not the sisters are able to take money from that for their dowry. Ishalach li de'ein motziin, had it been that in that case that my shaila was about a mashkon, that then if Rebbe would have answered ein motziin, then all the more so kol shekain machro, which is a more complete sale. Of course, that wouldn't be allowed. But had I written the shaila that way about mashkenu, ishalach le motziin, had it been that Rebbe responded that yes, motziin, that a woman is allowed to tap into the lakuchos there and get paid, akati machru kami baili, I still wouldn't have known the answer, and therefore, what I did, says Rav, is echtov le, I wrote in the letter shibdu that the properties were simply given as a shibud one way or another. Demashmahachi umashmahachi. So now we have a little bit of clarity that Rav sent a shaila to Rebbe, and Rav Chia didn't understand right here. Rav Chia didn't understand the shaila. And the Gemara debates why Rav didn't over detail his question, and Rav gives a very clear answer. Fine. All of that is part one of this sugya of the letter. Now, it says the Gemara about a quarter of the way down, Samach Testament Aleph, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, echad ze ve'echad ze ein motzin. He says, no matter what, whether or not the brothers sold the properties in full, or they only put up the properties as a collateral, the halacha is ein motziin, that a sister is not allowed to go back to the lakuchos or to the one who's holding on to the mashkon and collect for her dowry. But the Gemara is very, very bothered by this, because Rebbe gave a clear psak on it at the top of the page. Rebbe said on the fourth, fifth line of the page here that either way, let's just look at his line. He says, either way, he says, motziin leparnasa ve'ein motziin lemazonos. He says that when it comes to a dowry, we do allow a woman to extract from these properties. So how could Rabbi Yochanan say that by parnasa ein motziin? That's not the way Rebbe understood. So the Gemara asks, hold on one second. The Rabbi Yochanan is the reason why Rabbi Yochanan went against Rebbe, because lo shmiya le hada Rebbe, because at this point in Jewish history, Rabbi Yochanan had never learned the brisa that we have laid out in front of us, that Rebbe says that when a property is given as a mashkon or sold, the sister is allowed to take her dowry from those properties, and he just never heard of Rebbe's shita. V'ishmiyale, but had Rabbi Yochanan heard of Rabbi Yochanan's shita, have a mekabale. O dilma, or perhaps shmiyale, Rabbi Yochanan did in fact hear the shita of Rebbe, v'lo mekabale, but he doesn't accept the shita of Rebbe. So says the Gemara as follows: third of the way down, 10 lines or so before the wide lines, Tashma. Let's bring an answer to Itmar. We have a statement from the Amoraim. Mishem meis v'hiniach shtei banos uben. A man dies and he has 2 daughters and 1 son. V'kadma harishona v'natla isor nesachim. The oldest daughter gets married and she takes 10%, which is her dowry, as we have learned. So let's say the man had 1,000 zuz to his name. She takes 100 zuz, and that is her dowry. And then v'lo hispika shnia legabos ad shemeis haben. The second sister doesn't yet get married by the time the brother dies. Remember, 2 girls and 1 boy. Oldest sister, let's call her Rachel. Rachel gets married. Leah does not yet get married. And then the son, Yehuda, dies. So then the Gemara says, once the son dies, then all the rules change. Because v'lo ispika shnia legabos ad shemeis haben. And in that case, the property, the remaining 900 zuz, is split equally among the sisters. So that means that of the 900 zuz, 450 goes to the older sister, who already got 100. She'll total 550. And then the remaining sister, Leah, will get the 450, half of 900. All is well and good. That should be the case. Amar Rav Yochanan, in such a case, what did Rav Yochanan say? Shnia vitra. What Rav Yochanan says is as follows, is that when the second daughter gets married, she does not get a dowry. because she got 450 zuz, even though it wasn't a dowry and it was a Yerusha. And we're going to discuss whether or not it was a Yerusha later today. But because she got her 450 already, so the din is that she is mevateres. And Amar of Chanina, hang on 1 second. Gdola mizu, it's even greater than that the second sister doesn't get anything. Mizusha amru motzin leparnasa vein motzin lemizonos, according to the one who says that we do give a woman money for her parnasa, but not for mizonos. Ve'at amris shnia vitra. How can you even say shnia vitra that the second sister, that Leah wouldn't even get her? She wouldn't even get her dowry. The Imisa, if you want to say that that's the case, then Nemalei man Amra. Had it been that Rabbi Yochanan had never heard of the Brisa of Rebbe, when he hears Rabbi Chanina quoted here, then he should have said, wait, where did you get that from? Because I paskin differently than you. And he didn't ask that question. And therefore, it must be that Rabbi Yochanan did know about Rebbe, and he fundamentally disagrees. Oh, so that's a possibility. Says the Gemara, no, 2 lines from the wide lines. Halfway down on Samach Testament Aleph, says the Gemara, not true. The Dilma La'olam Lo Shmiele. Really, maybe Rav Yochanan never heard of the Shita of Rebbe that we do give from these properties to a woman who needs a dowry. V'chi Shmiele Lo Shmiele V'chi Shmiele Kabil. He never heard of it, and he really would have accepted the Shita of Rebbe. V'shayni Hasam the Ika Ravacha Besa. Really, fundamentally, it may be that Rav Yochanan agrees that under other circumstances that this woman would be able to collect from properties that the brothers incorrectly sold or put up for collateral. But here it's different. The shiny Hassam, in the case that we just said where the father died and the remaining 900 zuz was split in half between Rachel and Leah, that's different, the Ika Rav Chabesa, because she's already getting money from the family. She's already getting spoiled. She's already getting a Yerusha. So because she's already getting a Yerusha, we're not going to double dip for her and allow her to take her what would have been 10% off of the 900, her 90 shekel, her 90 zuz dowry. We don't allow her to do that. Amar le Rav Yemar the Ravashi, I don't understand. You're saying she got money from elsewhere so that she shouldn't get her dowry. What does one thing have to do with the other? Who cares that she got money because her father died? She's still getting married. She should be able to get a separate line item from her father that's called a dowry. Why are you saying that just because she got a Yerusha from her father, that therefore she doesn't deserve a dowry? Those are 2 different things. One's Yerusha, one's dowry. Why would you say that she shouldn't get her dowry? Says the Gemara, Elamayata, if it's true that because of Rav Chabesa, because she profited, half of the Yerusha money, she therefore shouldn't get her dowry, says the Gemara. What if ashkecha mitzia be'alma? Let's say a woman finds a huge diamond. So she already has profits and therefore she doesn't get her dowry. So she finds a mitzia be'alma di'ika Rav Chabesa. She made money off of her father's estate. We would say that just because she found money elsewhere, she doesn't get her dowry. That doesn't make any sense. A woman who's getting married should be able to get dowry money from her father to the tune of 10%. So you're saying if she finds a diamond, that makes no sense. Says the Gemara, Amar Le, no. Finding something on the street is not the same thing as getting a Yerusha. Amar Le, second wide line, Ana Ravach Besa, Mehani Nichse Kamina. I'm talking about, when is it that we say that the dowry is dissolved for the second sister? The dowry is dissolved for the second sister when she gets a Yerusha, because she already got a large chunk of change when the father died in the form of a Yerusha, which was way larger than the dowry. So therefore, the Gemara keeps this answer. The Gemara says 2/3 of the way down, 3 lines into the wide lines, Amar Meimar, Bas Yoreshes Havia. When we look at a dowry, we halachically treat it like a Yerusha. That's what the Gemara says. Now think about that. We have to give a parameter to the type of payment of, like when you... for people who do accounts receivables, so or any type of budgeting, you do your taxes. Where did you spend your $37 on that website? Like, is that going to be in the IT department? Like, what is that? What did you pay for? So the Gemara is saying over here, when we give a line item of a dowry, what is the overall genre, category of that money's expenditure? So Ameimar says on the 3rd line, it's Basio Reshes Havia, similar to a woman who gets a Yerusha. Amar le Ravashi le Ameimar. Okay, you're comparing the dowry to a Yerusha. Ilu, says the Gemara, Ilu baile sluka bezuze. If the brothers just wanted to pay off the sister with random zuz, not actual dowry money, hachanami de lo mati lisluka, would it be that they're not able to do that, just like by a Yerusha? Amar le'in, that's correct, because we said that that the Isor Nechasim, that the dowry is similar to a Yerusha. And the Gemara asks as well, let's say we wanted to give her one piece of land, which you're not allowed to do as a Yerusha. She gets to pick the land. So then Hachanami de Lomatzi Mesalikla, they couldn't do that as a form of avoiding paying her Yerusha. Says the Gemara, that's absolutely correct. So that was the shita of Hameimar, is that we look at a dowry as being similar to a Yerusha. However, Rav Ashi Amar, no. We view the dowry as a bas bailas chov, that it's as if the father owes money. It's different than a Yerusha. It's as if the father owes money to his daughter. Very different genre of money. And says the Gemara, really, ve'afa meimar hadarbe. Even a meimar backtracked his initial shita. A meimar, who we just learned, tried to assume and assert that the concept of a dowry is similar to a Yerusha. Even he agrees to Rav Ashi that really the Isor Nesachim, really the dowry is more similar to a bas chov. Where do we see this from? Says the Gemara, De Amar Rav Minyumi berei de Rav Nichumi. This person said, this Amora said, Haba ka'imna kame de Ameimar. I was standing in front of Ameimar, ve'asoi hahi itza lekame, and there was a woman who came into Bezdin to have us kabaya isor nesachim, and she went into Bezdin and said, I'm getting married, and Ameimar, you're the dayan, I need you to give me my isor nesachim from my father's estate. V'chazise ledaite, and I watched what happened. This is again. This is Rav Minyumi Bered Rav Nichumi, who was watching this interaction with Hameimar and this woman who was requesting money for her dowry. Luka Zuze have a misalekla, and that had it been that really we tried to pay off this money with Zuz, with Zuzim, if the brothers tried to pay her off, it does work. Where did we see this from? Deshame, because he heard Deshame me'ache dehavu ka'amrela, that the brothers of this woman actually said, Ilu havalan zuze, if we had any extra cash, slikna bezuze, we would have paid you off with money. And the ishtik, Ameimar said nothing. Ishtik v'lo amar luhu v'lo midi. Now, had it been that Ameimar said that a dowry is similar to a Yerusha, he would never have sat silently, because you can't pay off a woman for her Yerusha unless it's with the actual Yerusha money. Masha'ein kain, if she's owed money as a balchov, we don't care where the money comes from as a balchov. So this chakira as to whether or not the money for a dowry is more similar to the category of Yerusha versus the category of a balchov, that's the chakira of the Gemara, and the Gemara concludes with clarity that we hold that a dowry really is in the category of a balchov and not in the category of a Yerusha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'hakol nihiyeh b'dvaro. Oh, this is so good. Okay, the Gemara says that we now have a conclusion. Now that we know that a dowry is really the line item that it is in the annual statement of dowry is in the category of a balchov, it's a simple chiyuv that the father has to his daughter. So then when the father dies, is it de'aba or de'achi? Whose burden is it? Does it come from the father's estate, or does it come from the brother's portion from the father's estate? Asks the Gemara, Lamai nafkamina. What is the difference between the two of saying that it's an obligation for the father or the brother? So the Gemara says it's a very big difference. And we're not going to get into this sugya. There's a 15-line Rashi that starts 1/3 of the way down, Dibur Hamaskal and Migba Beinanis V'Shelo B'Shua. And I'll just be touching on the one practical point from that Rashi, but really, in the learning world, this is the time we would open another Masechta, learn a whole sugya, and then come back here. Halavai, we should have time to do things like that in the future. We don't now. So says the Gemara, the my nafkamina, halfway through the wide lines, says the Gemara, the nafkamina is the migba lebeinanis shelo b'shvua, is that when she collects from a brother, the halacha is she's allowed to take from beinonis, from medium quality types of properties, and shelo b'shvua. But if she's collecting money from her father, that's from viziburis, from poor quality properties, but b'shvua. So which one is it? Do we say that this financial burden of the dowry, which is similar to a balchov, do we say that she's collecting from the father or from the brother? Says the Gemara. Let's see. Tashma. We have a brisa. Oh, it's actually not a brisa, because Ravina was an Amora. Tashma, we have an answer. De Ravina agbe librate de Ravashi mimar bere de Ravashi beinanis v'shelo b'shvua. And in a particular case, we saw that Ravashi paskin the case where the payment was from a beinanis and without a shvua. And what does that show us? It shows us that we're not talking about the collection from a father, which means it's a collection from the brothers, because only for a brother do we have a beinanis v'shelo b'shvua. And de Rav Sama, Bere de Rav Ashi, from another son, it was Ziburis Bishua, another part of the sugya. Again, this is a longer sugya, but in short, we see the Raya Brura over here that he paid her from Beinanis, from properties that were Beinanis, from medium quality properties and without a Shavua, and that is Gematria for, it is the brother's obligations to pay. Story time. Shalach le Rav Nechemia bered Rav Yosef le Rabba bar Rav Huna Zuta mina Harda. A letter was sent from one person to another. Ki asya ha'itza lekamach agba isor nesachim. When this woman comes before you, he was just kind of foreshadowing a guest that was going to come to Bezdin. She wants to collect her isor nechasim. She wants to collect her dowry. Afilu mi itzrubla, even from the itzrubla. And itzrubla, Rashi says, let's just look immediately to the right, 15 lines or so from the bottom of the Rashi's. Itzrubla is Moshav Amasari Chaim. It's like this large base that is like the platform upon which a mill sits. So a very, very heavy piece of rock, whatever the case may be. And we consider that to be like karka because it's so heavy. It would be the equivalent of building a cement platform on the ground and then putting a shed on top. So the big cement platform on the bottom, that's like karka. Amar Ravashi ki havina and Rav Kahana have a magbina nafilu me amla de basi. Forget that. We would even be able to pay off her dowry even from amla de basi. Amla de basi is basically rent. And in our world, that would mean if you are an owner of a building and every month you get a rent check from the 15 apartments in your building, you can pay a dowry even from that. Next, another story. Shalach le Rav Anan le Rav Huna. Rav Anan sent a letter to Rav Huna. Rav Anan was not as big of a Talmud Chacham as Rav Huna. But when Rav Anan wrote his letter, here's what he wrote. Huna chavrin shalom. Huna, my friend, peace be upon you. Now, really, it wasn't right because he was sending a letter to someone that's greater. I remember when I was a little kid, my friends were not allowed to refer to my parents by their first names. I was never allowed to call adults by their first names. This guy broke that line. He called someone greater than him by the first name. Hey, what's going on? You can't speak that way to a chashav rab. That's not right. That's what he did. Oh, Huna, chavrin shalom, Huna, my friend. You should have peace. So then, Ki Asya, what did he write to Huna? What did Rav Anan write to Huna? So he wrote, Ki Asya itza lekamach, when this woman comes before you, Agba Isra Nichse, she wants to collect her dowry. So then, here's what happened. Haba Yosef Rav Sheshes Kame, Rav Sheshes was sitting in front of Huna when he opened this letter. Omar Le, Huna said to Rav Sheshes, what? Did I skip a line? Sorry, what? Yeah, that's correct. It's true. His name is Rav Huna. I did it from the story. All right, let's go back. Thank you. Shalach le Rav Anan le Rav Huna, and he sent a little bit of a disparaging, lack of kavod text message that said Huna Chavrin Shlam. And Ki Asya, when that letter showed up, he said that in the letter that Ha'itza lekamach agba Isur Nichse. And when that letter was opened, Haba Yasi Rav Sheshes Kameh in front of Rav Huna. Amar le Rav Huna says to Rav Sheshes, Zil Emale, I want you to go tell him something, but listen to me, says Rav Huna to Rav Sheshes. Uvishamta Yehe, I will put anyone into Cherem, Mandelo Amarle, who doesn't say exactly what I want to be said. I have a little slap upside the head for Rav Anan. What is it? Anan, calling him a little double, right? You called me Huna once, I'm calling you Anan twice. A little Anan, Mimikarkai o Mimitatale. How would you like me to pay her? Do you want me to pay her out of the Mikarka? You want me to pay them out of the fixed properties, or do you want me to pay them out of the Metaltalim? Which is basically the ABCs that we don't pay dowries from Metaltalim. So he's kind of joking around with him like, oh, do you want me to do something that's completely ridiculous that we all know about? Meaning you're not a Talmud Chacham. I'm pushing back on you. And as well, I have another question for you, says Rav Huna to Rav Sheshes, to tell Rav Anan. Uman Yosef Bey Marzicha Beresha. Who is the one who is Beimar Zicha Beresha, who's sitting at the head of the particular table? We don't yet know what this means. End of comment. So, Hazal Rav Sheshes, the comment to Rav Anan. He is the unfortunate messenger. And he has to go back to Rav Anan, and he has to share these words, lest Rav Huna put him into Cherem. And Omar Le, he did give the polite caveat. He says, listen, Mar Rabba, your teacher is Rabba, V'Rav Huna, Rabbi de Rabba, and Rav Huna is the rabbi of your rabbi. Vishamute shamislan, and I was told that if I will be put into cherem, I was told I'll be put into cherem if I don't convey the following message to you. Shamute man de lo amarle, if I don't say what Rav Huna wants me to tell you. If not for the threat of having been put into shamta, into excommunication, lo hava ka'amina, I would never say what I'm about to say, but here goes, because I will be in cherem if I don't say it. Here is what Rav Huna wanted me to tell you. And you can like kind of feel the awkwardness a little bit, like anan, it's like awkward. Anan. I'm not supposed to be calling you that, but I had to do it. Anan. Yeah, a little bit like mi mikarkoi, oh mi metaltale, you am haaretz. Which one of these would you like to pay her from? And also, he told me to tell you, uman yasi be marzicha beresha, who's sitting at the head of this kind of table. So Rav Anan was a little torn. He didn't totally understand. So Azal Rav Anan lekame de Mar Ukva, and he went over to Mar Ukva and said, Amar le Chazi Mar hechi shalach li Rav Huna Anan. He sent me this comment through Rav Sheshes. It was inappropriate. He called me Anan. Not only that, Vod, he wrote this strange comment of Marzicha de Shalach li lo yadana mayni. What was he talking about with the Marzicha table? What is going on there? Says the Gemara, Amar li Ema li easy. I'd like you to please tell me, top of Samach Testament base. Gufa de Uvda Hechi Hava. What exactly was your initial dialogue with him that you got this strange retort from Rav Huna? So the Gemara says, Amar Le, Rav Anan gave him the whole Hachi v'Hachi Hava. So this is what happened. I said that he was Chavrin. I said Huna Chavrin Shalom. So Amar Le, Gavra de lo yada mai nihu marzicha. You who don't even know what the word marzicha means. Shalach le Rav Huna Chavrin. You don't even know what a marzicha is, and you have the audacity to go over to that Rav and call him Huna without calling him Rav Huna? That's crazy. You're a Talmud. He's the Rebbe of your Rebbe. It's a chutzpah. You deserve the slap upside the head for sure. So fine, that was the end of that part of the story, but we still don't know what a marzicha table is. So says the Gemara, my marzicha, says the Gemara, avel. It's talking about an avel. And apparently, when Rav Huna threw this back to Rav Anan, he knew that Rav Anan wouldn't know what it was. How? I don't know. Again, these are cultural colloquialisms. We don't know what was going on there, but that's what the Gemara says. Dichsiv, how do we know that the word marzicha references an avel? Ko amar Hashem al tavo beis marzech. Fine. Amar Reb Abba minayin le'evel shemesa barosh. How do we know that an avel sits at the head of the table? Which was what Rav Sheshes had to tell Rav Anan by way of Rav Huna. Too many names here. Shene'emar, as the Gemara says, evchar darkam ve'eshev rosh. Ve'eshkon kimelach begdud kasher abelim Yenachem. Says the Gemara, Yenachem, the one sitting at the table, Yenachem, he should give comfort. Yenachem acherim. That the language implies of Yenachem that he's giving comfort to others. Mashma. Amar Rav Nachman, you're right. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, the word is actually Yenucham. This is where grammar comes in. This is sometimes you have to know how to correct the Balkore. If somebody reads this pasuk Yenachem, that means he will comfort others. If he says Yinucham, it means he should get comforted by others. So sometimes there are very gentle errors that a person who doesn't know diktuk, like all of us, me too, the person makes a gentle error as a Balkore, and it changes the meaning of the word. A mapikeh changes the meaning of the word. So it's very hard. And then some people's mapikehs are more clear than others. What's the halachic standard? It's not simple. Okay. Marzutra Amar Mehacha, he says that the source of this is from another place. Visar, says the Gemara, Visar Mirzach Seruchim. What does this mean? Mar Vizach Naaseh Sar Seruchim. The one who is bitter, the one who is besieged, he is the one who will become the officer of the sour ones, a reference to an Avel. And now the Gemara just gives a final statement, Amar Rava, Hilchasa, the halacha is when it comes to paying a dowry, it is only mimekar ka'e, it is only from immovable properties that have a lien on them, below mimetaltale. And this is true, bein lemizone, bein leksuba, bein leparnasa, and all three categories that we've discussed about a person's obligation to feed his family, about a ksuba, and about a parnasa, about a dowry. Don't worry, it only gets harder from here. The next Mishnah starts a third of the way down on Samach Testament Beis. Hamashlish ma'os labito, a person who is using a third party, that's the mashalish or the mashlish, who's using a third party to pay his daughter. So he says to a man, please go give my daughter $500. And then when he walks over to her, she says, V'hi omeres ne'eman baili alai. You can just give it to my husband. Is that allowed? Yes or no? So the Mishnah says, Yaseh hashlish masha hushlash biyado. He has to do what he was told. He'll say to that woman, that's great, you trust your husband. I'm glad that there's shalom bayis. I'm not allowed to give the money to anybody else. I have to give the money only to you. Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yossi argues, Omer, if had it been a field and she wanted to sell it, it's as if she had already sold it, which basically is the Gemara's way of saying she can do with her money whatever she wants. And even though you have yet to give it to her, had you given it to her a second later, then it would have belonged to, she could have done whatever she wants. So we should allow you to give it. So he says that that's fine. But when is it that we would say this? Big Gdola. That's only if the wife was a Gdola. She was already bas mitzvah. Aval biktana. When it comes to a ktana, a girl who is not yet bas mitzvah, ein ma'aseh ktana klum. And the Gemara opens about 8 lines before the wide lines with a brisa that's quite similar to our Mishnah, Tan Rabbanan. Hamash lishmos lechasno. If a person sets aside money through a third party for his son-in-law, so Rachel's father is Yaakov, in this example, and Yaakov sets aside money for Rachel's husband. So then likach min sadeh mehen sadeh labito. You can, and he gives him that money. The father-in-law gives the money to the son-in-law so he can buy a property for his daughter. He omeres yinasnu lebayli. Just give it to the husband. We're going to share a bank account. All is well and good. So says this Gemara. This is a machlokes. Shita number 1. Min hanisuin. If they're fully married, harishus biyada. She can say that. But min ha'erisin, had they only been halachically engaged, yaseh ashlish masha hushlash biyada devi Rameir. Rameir says that if they're only engaged, then the person who's the shlish, the apotropos, the person who's just controlling the funds, he has to do what he was commanded to do, and that is to give the money directly to the daughter only. Rabbi Yossi argues and says, Omer Gdola, if she was a Gdola, bein min hanisuin, ubein min ha'erisin, harishus biyada, doesn't matter. If she's a Gdola, she can do whatever she wants. Kitana, but if she's a Ktana, then bein min hanisuin, bein min ha'erisin, yaseh shlish masha hushlash biyado. So says the Gemara, therefore, that if she is a Ktana, then no matter what, she has no say in the matter. She can't decide that the money can go to her husband. And the shlish, the apotropos, has to give the money directly to her. My beinaihu, what is the difference between these two cases, these two shitas of Rav Meir and Rav Yossi and this new brisa in the Gemara? And on the first long line, the Gemara responds, if you want to say the difference between these two shitas of Rav Meir and Rav Yossi is ktana min hanisuni kebeinaihu, the case that really is a difference is a case of a girl who's a ktana, but who was fully married. What would the difference be? Rav Meir savar harishus biyada. Rav Meir says that she's a ktana, but she is married. Therefore, she can choose if the money should go to her husband or not. And then ve'asa Rav Yossi lemeimar no afilu min hanisuin nami gdola in ktana lo, that he argues that by a ktana who's married, she is not allowed to do that. She's not allowed to say that the husband can get the money. But that can't be that that's what they're arguing about. They cannot be arguing about the case of Ketana min hanisuin, because 3 lines into the wide lines, we already learned this at the latter part of the brisa. Aval biktana, at the end of our Mishnah, actually, aval biktana ein ma'aseh ktana klum. So you can't say that the argument between Rabbi Yossi and Rav Meir is about a ktana, because a ktana is a nothing. She can't make any of these decisions financially. So it says the Gemara, Haman Ktanila, who would then be the author of our Mishnah? Ilema Rabbi Yossi, Hamed Reisha Shamas Mina. Rabbi Yossi already said that in the Reisha. So that line of the Mishnah of Biktana, Ein Ma'aseh Ktana Klum, that can't be him. Dam Rabbi Yossi, B'chi Eina Ela Sada, V'hi Rotza L'mochra, Harehi Mechura Me'achshav, Gedola Debas Zvini, In. She has to be a Gedola who's eligible to make the sale. But Ktana, Delav Bas Zvini Hilo. But the Ktana is not able to make the sale. We already knew the Shita of Rabbi Yossi from the Reisha that a Ktana is not able to make this decision. Ella, the line in the brisa which says that the ma'aseh ktana is nothing. Ella Rav Meir he. If you want to say it's Rav Meir, that can't be. And that really we wanted to read it this way. The chasuri mechzra b'hachiktani. We can reread the brisa this way. The yaseh hashlish masha hushlash biyado. That really the apotropos has to give over the money directly to her. B'med dvarim amurim. How would Rav Meir read this brisa? Only min ha'erisin. Only if the ktana was engaged. Aval min hanisuin harishus biyada. So it says the Gemara. B'med dvarim amurim. That's only true big dola. That can't be. It doesn't make any sense. So therefore, we're stuck, and we still need to figure out where is the machlokas, or what is the machlokas between Rav Meir and Rabbi Yossi? And the Gemara responds, and we're just going to learn 2 more lines and stop at the 2 dots. Ella says the Gemara, the difference between Rav Meir and Rabbi Yossi is Gdola min ha'erusin ika beinayu. The difference between these 2 shitas is a woman who's a Gdola, but she's only halachically engaged. And then this apotropos comes over to her and says, I have money to give you from your father. So that's where that we would see the machlokas. The Gemara concludes, Itmar, Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel says halacha is Rabbi Yossi, and Rava Amar Rav Nachman says halacha is Rabbi Meir. So what would the nafkamina be? Is that Rabbi Meir would be lenient in a case of a gedola who's an arusa, and the apotropos comes over to her and says, "Here's money for you." So according to Rabbi Meir, he'd be makil and say she's allowed to say, "Give the money to the husband. We don't have to go play the whole charade. Just give it straight to the husband." Ma'ashein kain, according to Rabbi Yossi, he would be strict and say that in such a case we would not allow her to decide that the money should go to the husband. We'll stop right here, 6 lines from the bottom of the page on Samach Testament Beis, and tomorrow night, Hashem will pick up with yet a new blot. Wishing you all a beautiful night.